What do you call cheese that isn't yours? Nacho cheese. Did you find that funny? Yes? Great. No? Exactly. Humor is so dependent on the audience that the best jokes won't be funny everywhere. Humor needs to relate to the audience, their culture, their societal backdrop, and like I discussed with Ferris Alronki in an earlier episode, you need to read the room. And comedy just challenges your EQ to a whole different level. You have to know the audience, read them, and adapt real time, real fast. So in this episode, I'll be talking about this exact topic with Sai Ramachandran, an engineer turned comedian and author of Humor Science, when your success depends on being funny and engaging. We dig into what makes people laugh or not, why technology won't replace a good joke, and how knowing your audience plays a big part of it all. Welcome to the show, Mind Blend. I'm your host, Karen Chong, and I'll be diving into the minds of incredible people, each an expert in their very own way. Together, we'll uncover insights and share ideas so you can be inspired and empowered to navigate your own unique journey in life. Ready to get curious and discover what's possible? Let's blend. Okay, today's guest is someone who has swapped code for comedy and hasn't looked back since. He's a former Goldman Sachs coder, an NYU computer science master grad, and now a stand-up comedian in India. He's smart, socially observant, and just the right amount of sarcastic. From dissecting life in the US to breaking down cultural quirks back home in India, he uses humor not just to entertain, but to challenge, reflect, and reframe. He's also the author of Human Science and the guy helping people punch up their content literally with jokes that actually land. Please welcome to Mind Blend, the one and only Sai Ramachandran.
Thank you, Karen. That did not sound like me at all. In my own head, I'm not funny, I'm not interesting, and I'm no one who deserves to be on a podcast, but I'm so happy to be here with you.
Well, we'll be the judge of that.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for coming to Mind Blend, Sai. I've alluded to this a little bit in the intro, but tell us a little bit more about yourself, your journey, how you grew up, how you got to where you are today.
So when most people, when they hear India, they know all the big, people outside India, of course, they know about the big places in India, the big megacities, Asian megacities, Bombay, Mumbai, Delhi, now Bangalore, Chennai, Calcutta. But I grew up in a really small town, and people might not believe it anymore, but there are still company towns which cater to a single industry, and everybody in that company works in that industry. I grew up in a place like that. The town is called Jamshedpur. It's also called Tata Nagar. That's where the Tata Steel plant, the one that many people might have heard of, that's where it's located. It's actually, my city was, the city I grew up in had a steel plant right in the middle of the city, and everybody in the city, nearly like, I would say 80% of the city worked for the Tatas and worked at the steel plant. And so it was literally a company town. And I grew up there. And for whatever reason, that part of India used to get a lot of attention from missionaries from across the world. So we had missionaries from America who would come and set up a school there called the Loyola School. And I was part of that school. And I remember growing up, going to this priest's room with all of us kids. We didn't have access to computers back then. He had a nice computer where he used to let us kids play Space Commanders. And that's how I came to know about something, that there are computers, there are computer games, there are Americans, and there are people in America who are actually good fun to hang out with. Before Baywatch and before everything else, before I watched TV. This was when I was, say, 8, 9 years old. So we used to go to this priest's room, all of us kids, at 7 o'clock in the morning, because our school used to start at 7:40. So we'd go to school by 7:15, we'd be in school. Then we'd make a beeline for this priest's room where he'd let us play computer games for the next 20, 30 minutes, then shoo us off and send us off to class. And that's how I came to know about the world outside my little town. And from there, I did my schooling in Loyola School. And then from there, I came to Bangalore for my engineering degree, my bachelor's degree. And soon after that, I moved to Chennai for a little bit of work for a few months. And then my sisters, by then, they were already living in the US by then. And they were like, you know what, you should come and study here. And since my sisters were there, my parents were like, go for it. And I applied, I got into NYU. And I came to New York in 2003 to do my master's in computer science. And it was a great experience. I mean, compared to the kind of education you get in your bachelor's, the step up to a master's program is huge, and the learning is great. So I learned a lot about computer science and how to think about computers and how to think about programming from that degree. Started working at Goldman Sachs. Then this was around roughly 2005 onwards until about 2011, when around the time of the crisis, the great financial crisis, the things were not looking good. So I moved on from Goldman Sachs and I did a bunch of mobile app development. I moved around in the US a lot. I lived there from New York. I moved to, you won't believe it, but I moved to Lawrence, Kansas, where KU is located. I stayed for a few months over there. Then from there, I moved to Pittsburgh, then Atlanta. And after that, I decided to come back to India. This was about after 14 or 15 years of living in the US, I decided to come back to India because my parents were getting older and I wanted to be close to them because my sisters would not be able to they had families by then. So they wouldn't be able to come back to India. So I had to come back. I didn't have to. I mean, it was a choice I made. I wanted to come back to India, A, for family reasons, and B, for slightly socio-political reasons, which we can discuss if we want, and we don't have to. But for slightly socio-political reasons, also, I came back to India. So I came back to India. And for the first few years after coming back to India, I still did computer science. I just still did consulting and software. But eventually I decided that, I need to do something a little more creative, a little more exciting for myself. And that's how comedy started last year. And there's a larger story behind how the comedy thing came about, but we can talk about.
This is very much about that. So you said there's a point where you wanted to do something more creative. Do you remember what made you think that?
Yes, I do. I mean, what happened was that my wife took a vacation. So last year, this was 2024. So around this time, May, June 2024, my wife took a vacation and went to visit her parents. And I was working on a startup of my own. I was working on an AI-driven startup of my own for hiring. And I remember that 2 weeks, the first week was okay. I was still busy with my startup. By the time the second week started, I was starting to ask myself whether I really wanted to work on this space at all. Did it really matter to me if this problem that I was trying to solve was getting solved correctly or not? So I didn't feel that passion for the problem I was trying to solve with my startup. So I decided that, I'm going to take a break and do something creative. And it so happened that right around that time, there was a few open mics happening in the city. And my wife was not there, so I had a lot of free time in my hands. My wife and kid were not there, so I had a lot of free time in my hands. And I decided that not only would I go for the open mic to see other performers, I'd also perform at the open mic. And the second week of my vacation at home, away from my wife and son, I wrote poetry. And I went and did poetry, but it was horrible poetry. Don't ask me to ever say it.
Okay.
What traffic in Bangalore? I live in Bangalore now, and the traffic here in Bangalore is legendary. There's roads and honking and traffic all the time. So my poems are about traffic. And as you can imagine, the poems didn't do really well. Nobody clapped, nobody liked it. But I still enjoy being on stage. And then I thought, what, poetry is not going to do it for me. I don't enjoy poetry that much. Maybe I'll do something simpler like comedy. But comedy, as I learned soon, it was much harder than it looks. So that was another little bit of a learning for me too, that I thought I could do comedy, but I couldn't. And but over time, I dug deeper into comedy and then tried to understand it a little more. And I, in fact, wrote a book about it because the way I think of, I'm an engineer at heart. I like to break down things into simpler parts and try and figure out how things work and put them together and all that. And the book Humor Science that you see in the background, it comes from that. It comes from knowing, or at least trying to learn comedy as a process that you can break down and figure out and internalize. And the best way to know that you've understood something is to write a book about it. And the second best way to take masterminds and teach other people how to do it. So the book and everything else I do, apart from the stand-up comedy shows that I do, comes from this aspect of wanting to learn comedy and then make sure I learned it well by teaching it to other people. So that's why the masterminds and all those things happen.
Wow. Yeah, like I see what you mean by dissecting it and like breaking it down into a process, because I also have the tendency to. So I had an economics degree. What I do right now has nothing to do with economics, but I tend to kind of like apply theories to things that I see. So yeah, if you eat 10 cakes, the last cake will have the least marginal utility. Like you get the least joy out of the cake.
My wife and you would be perfect. You guys could sit and discuss economics all day because she has an economics PhD as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I see. So now that you have been doing this comedy, what's your style? Do you have a style of comedy? What types of comedy do you usually do?
So I've been asked this question multiple times, and I've realized that I don't really know what my style is. And I think a comedian style emerges from experience, like decades of experience and all that. And it also emerges from what other people tell them, that what this is it that I'm taking from your comedy. So I don't believe that I can even with a straight face tell you what my style of comedy is, because I don't know. I know what I like to talk about on stage, but how
Mm-hmm.
to bucket it, what brand name to give it, what bow tie to put on it, I don't know. But I do know that there are some types of comedy I don't really enjoy doing much. Say, for
Mm-hmm.
example, uh, comedy about relationships and family stuff. It doesn't really
Uh-huh.
work. And I don't really care. I mean, at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day, it's not, these are not my stories that I want to share, because I
Mm-hmm.
have an okay relationship with most people around me. I mean, there's not much going on in my life that I need to make jokes about. But I do a little bit of political comedy and satire and all that. If you look
Mm-hmm.
at my Instagram, you'll see a couple of videos on, sketch type videos. So you'll see those things. So in my view, if you ask a comedian and they're able to say this early in their career, it's been a few years of me, a year and a little bit of me doing comedy, if they are able to tell you what they do, I think they're either deluding themselves, or they believe they do a certain type of comedy, but they don't really fall into that bucket. Or they've been told that you have to have a brand, and so you have to think of something to say when people ask you this. I don't believe anybody actually knows what kind of comedy they do.
Ah, I see. Yeah, like they're sort of boxing themselves into something. Or maybe they're trying to find an anchor so they can
Maybe
go from there.
that's probably it. That they need something to some starting point so that they can anchor themselves in the other person's head. That okay, this person does family comedy, this person does political satire, this person does dark humor, all that stuff. They just need to root themselves somewhere, like you said.
Yeah. So I'm sure you have seen comedies from all around, comedians from different places. And because you spent a lot of time in the US as well,
Hmm?
do you notice a difference between like an American audience and an Indian audience now that you're in India?
Yes. The difference is that an American audience, there is a story being told about America at all points. If you look at the media, if you look at the narratives, not, I mean, narrative sounds like a bad word, but I mean, the stories Americans tell themselves about their country and their society is set, as in it's known that okay, things are changing again. The political upheaval that's going on all over the world, including the US, is obviously going to change a few things over the next few years. But
Mhm.
until when I was living in the States, and until say 5 years ago, there was a narrative that was available to all Americans as hard work, success, then immigrant friendly. We are a home for everybody. So those are norms that have been pushed into society, and available and accessible and agreed upon by everybody in society. Indian society is not like that. At least maybe I don't see it, but it's in my view, when I'm doing comedy, it's a lot harder to come up with a definition of what India is. Okay,
Ah,
if you don't have the definition, either you propose it to the audience through your comedy and hope that the audience agrees with it,
hmm
or you make jokes about the fact that you don't have a definition. But that makes it a lot harder when you're doing comedy, because
mm
say let's take an example of America as a country where it's a land of opportunity. That if you work hard, you'll attain success. That nobody's gonna. If you make a joke about that today, either in a positive way supporting it, or in a negative way undermining it, that main thesis that there is a central core tenet of Americanism, which is hard work equals success, is not questioned. Okay, but that's not true of India. If you come to India and you make a joke about anything, there'll be two people or whatever, 10 to 20% of the audience which will
uh-huh.
agree with you. And the remaining 80% will be, no, 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 that's not true. I've seen counter examples of that. I don't know if you.
Oh,
So it becomes super hard to know what is it that Indians as a country agree upon and believe in.
mm
Even to make a serious point on this, say there is this. I don't know. Most people don't realize it, but Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India, he is pushing this narrative that India is like a spiritual leader of the world. He calls it the Vishwa Guru, the world guru.
uh-huh.
He wants to position India as a spiritual and a spiritual counterweight to the kind of society that has emerged and it exists today, and he wants to push that narrative. But that angle of India being a spiritual say, ballast to the world. Even Indians don't agree on that. There's a lot of questioning on that, whether we don't believe it. We don't believe in any truly Indian or truly Indian ethos, because it's maddeningly diverse compared to the US and many other countries. I mean, I've read recently that I think Nigeria and a few other countries in sub-Saharan Africa, they have a lot of diversity as well, in terms of a small country having a lot of languages and stuff. But India is like, it takes it to the next level, man. It's a huge country with a huge amount of diversity as well. And so when you ask me whether audiences are different, the audiences are different because of this, that there are some truths that you can work with when it comes to American comedy. If you're starting out like me, then you know that, okay, at the end of the day, even if nothing else works, even if my personal jokes about my own upbringing or my parents don't work, I can always make jokes about, say, the political system there, or a few things over there, that success equals hard work equals success and all those things. But in India, you can't do that. You don't know what is going to work, because nobody has told you that this is what being Indian means. So that's a slightly long-winded answer to explain that we are an emerging democracy, emerging country, and that country emerging needs to lead to a cohesive identity as an Indian person, which then you can talk about, which we've not reached that stage yet, which means that audiences are not ready to accept anything at face value that you say to set up your joke, which means that you have to either aim for low-hanging fruit, or you have to know your audience really well and say that, okay, this audience, if it's an audience of, say, IT nerds, then you can make jokes being an IT nerd. Then there'll be no question about whether it's true or not. So that's the big thing. And in my view, that's the big difference between the more established country. I mean, as a nation, there's a longer history America has than India does, clearly.
Yeah.
That's the difference. Does it make sense, right? You give too much.
It makes it very hard. So imagine you're doing a company presentation, but the audience is all different. So finding that anchor to get them to all laugh is really hard. Have you found any like foolproof jokes that every time you say it, you get a lot of laughs?
I have not, but I mean, I don't want to also find certain, like, certain types of jokes that I always fall back on. But I do know that there are people who have, like, there's this one comedian I really appreciate for the kind of courage he shows in doing his comedy. His name is Kunal Kamra, and he's the kind of guy who makes amazing political satire. Like, he knows it, and if you go to his shows, that's what you're going to get. You're not going to get some feel good family stuff where husband and wife have problems and kids are difficult to live with, and grandparents are too indulgent to grandchildren. Those kind of jokes he won't do. He'll only do political satire. So I think that is India has a tradition of political satire. India has a tradition of questioning authority, and so there is obviously right now in the last 5-10 years, we've reached that strongman era of politics where you cannot question the leader of the country anymore, not to the extent that he used. So those things are still a little bit risky for individuals, but so when it comes to comedy, I think he's found an audience and a message that usually works. He's really funny. It helps that he's also a very experienced comic, and he makes really good jokes. For me, I don't have anything like that. I don't believe so. But I do like to make, in fact, one of my specials coming out soon has a few jokes about data science and a few jokes, quantum mechanics. So I'm trying everything. I'm trying to see what works. And one thing I will tell you, that because there is no core 5 or 6 things that being Indian means, every time you make a joke which somebody likes, for example, by the joke about quantum mechanics, or the joke about, say, data science, people who come and say, you know what, the joke was really nice and really funny, but I don't think the rest of the audience got it. And I keep getting that. I keep getting this feedback. This joke, but nobody else got it. And it's like half the audience will come and say that to me. I'm like, no, don't worry. People have been telling me the same thing about the same jokes from their perspective. Nobody else got it, but they did. So I think that's probably one thing, that Indians are starved for intelligent comedy. And maybe that's the closest I would want to be. I would like to be the guy who makes intelligent comedy, which is not just about situational stuff that happens, or interpersonal dynamics and all those things.
And you yourself, having lived in the States, you probably have heard of, stereotypes of Indians. So even though in my head, as you were talking, I was thinking, well, maybe you can do some like overseas or in America, they think Indians are all like this type, but it's not true. However, if the audience haven't lived in America themselves, probably wouldn't resonate.
They wouldn't get it. I mean, they
Hmm.
just wouldn't. And,
Hmm.
that if you have lived if you have any interest in living abroad, you would make the choice. I mean, India is not a it's not for the faint-hearted. So if you want to get out, any people like move heaven and earth to do it. So the people like me who are in India, they are sort of happy here. I mean, we're happy to where we are, and like you said, we might not have the familiarity of what is it that Americans think and why is it absurd? Because that first part itself, nobody knows what Americans think about Indians in India.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Like the ones who have lived somewhere, then they know. They probably because
There are
it's
some
yeah.
Indian American comedians who are making really good comedy around this. This guy, his name is I forget his name. His last name is Singh, and there's also Nimesh Patel who makes really
Yeah.
he makes really nice comedy about the Indian experience living in the US. I mean, some of the
Yes.
stuff I can
Yeah.
and I can listen to it on loop. He's that funny.
Yeah.
He's
I
really
think it's
yeah.
very funny. So are there any
Wait, I should tell you this that there is Russell Peters, who's a Canadian.
Yeah.
No, I don't Indian Canadian, but
Yeah.
I realized that he came to perform in Mumbai recently, a couple of years ago.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, he's. I mean, he comes to India every once in a while to perform.
Hmm.
And the funny thing is that even his comedy, though he's of Indian origin and his jokes are his target audience is Indians and South Asians and people in the diaspora.
Yeah.
Even then, his style of comedy is moving away from what is familiar to Indians and the kind of comedy that Indians like. And when I was listening to his comedy, he was making jokes about, for example, getting a prostate exam from a doctor. Those wouldn't land well in India simply because Indians don't discuss prostate. We just a more reserved and conservative society. So if you were to make jokes about prostate exams, either they have to be super super funny, just the situational aspects of it. That I was in an exam, I was in a prostate exam room, and this happened and that happened. Just the situation of it will not be funny because most people don't know about it. So what I'm trying to say is that even Indian comedians who have lived abroad a lot, or who basically are from, say, Canada or the US, they don't know how to make Indian comedy be attractive and funny to Indian audiences. I think that's what.
Well, that can be your niche. That can be your edge.
Approachable comedy which people understand across the world. Wow.
Yeah. So you said like the prostate exam as an example. What are some other things that are off limits? Like off limits as in you will get killed, off limits. And what are some things that are just not funny?
They're not so for example, anything which relates to, say, doctor experiences, lawyer jokes, or experiences with in the court system and the police system. For example, if there were jokes about, I was pulled over by a cop and this happened and that happened, that nobody's going to find funny because those things don't really happen a lot. But even if they happen at a very our interactions in India with the judicial system and the legal and the law enforcement system is very minimal. It's like we basically don't know, and in fact, the truth is we don't know how the police operate, or what the correct operating procedure for a police like a traffic stop is going to be. We just don't know, and there's no awareness of what goes on when somebody stops you and asks you, when a cop stops you and asks you for a license, and then they call you to the court to maybe clear out a fine or something. We just don't know those things. And when you don't know something and then you try to make jokes about it, the anchoring is not there. We have no idea about what happens in these things, so that's not going to work. So doctor exam or lawyer interaction with family courts and lawyers, those are not going to work. Then law enforcement, sports, we love watching sports. We just culture, we don't have a lot of like a deep understanding of what goes on in a team. For example, like when you football team or a cricket team or a soccer team, what goes on inside that. So if you listen to certain comedians talk about, their experiences in playing university football, those jokes, as a culture, people know broadly what it looks like, right?
Yeah.
How a football coach sounds when he's trying to pep up the team and make them go a little harder. So you have some idea of that. So when you make jokes about that, it's at least familiar to you as an American. But if you're an Indian, We know that we have a cricket team. We know we have a very successful cricket team and this team and that team. What we don't know is what that team looks like from the inside. So those jokes are not going to land. And what can get me killed? Oh man, that if you make jokes about certain religious icons, you just can't do that. I mean, it won't get you killed. It'll get you a lot of cancellation. You might, bullied and harassed online. You might have. So Kunal Kamra, the person I talked about before, he made a joke about a political figure recently. And foolishly enough, he actually did a recorded set, as in he did a performance in front of a live audience, and that set was recorded. He released the recording online. This is at a venue called Habitat. Habitat is a very, now it's no longer there because people came and vandalized it. But Habitat used to be a very famous comedy space in Mumbai. So he performed at Habitat, and then a month after he finished performing and the video was released, the people who supported that political icon that he was making fun of got really pissed off about it, and they went and destroyed Habitat, and Habitat is now shut down. So you just don't want to inflame opinions on certain topics, religious icons, religious anything, and political things. And the reason for that, there's a reason for this, because the US has free speech protections. It's a little easier to make those jokes and get away with it. Many countries, including say countries in Europe and India and other Asian countries, they've come up with the hate speech laws where you have to be mindful about what you say, and others can claim outrage based on what you said, and that'll be legally, they'll have footing to say it. Which is why you cannot make jokes about religion and iconic figures, because then somebody's going, I got offended because you made a joke about my political leader, and you need to sort this out. So there's a foundation on because of which comedians can't do certain things that they can do in, say, the US. And US is exceptional in that case. I mean, I don't think there are too many countries in the world where free speech is so deeply entwined in everything. So those hate speech laws and those rules against giving offense are also part of, I think, European countries and India for sure.
Yeah, comedy is a science. It's a science. It's an art form. It's like EQ, testing your EQ to the max, because you have to read the audience and improvise and adapt. And it's something that AI can't quite do. Like, I think humor is something that AI or technology can't really help with that, because it's sort of, you have to pair things that don't belong together and try to draw relations to each one of them. So I think, yeah, you have a bright future in front of you. You have your edge, something AI can't replace.
You'd be surprised at how much, say, I'm only familiar with ChatGPT. It can do a bit. It can get you, say, 20 jokes in a rush. If you just say, give me 20 jokes on, say, cup of tea, it'll come out with 20 jokes. 19 and a half of them will be terrible, but that half which will trigger something in your head, which will become the kernel for a good joke. So it's not there yet, but it's not that far off also. And I think that's okay. And I think the reason for that is that each comedian is catering to a certain audience, and they have very, very specific experiences and grounding and things they've observed and experienced and realized over the course of their life that an AI model simply cannot reproduce. It's impossible, simply because, for example, I grew up in a steel town where we used to manufacture steel in the middle of the city. There used to be, our evenings were beautiful because at night the furnace used to be open. I don't know what they used to do, but at night the entire sky used to get lit up because the light from the furnaces used to be reflected in the sky. So those are things that I can tell you now, and you can be, I see it, I can get the sense of it. But an AI would not have read enough text about it.
Yeah.
There's not enough content gets created, and AI is not getting trained by me telling you the story. It's getting trained by all this corpus of data that people have been writing about and talking about and creating before this. So AI does not have the full context of my life, and as I can use that to make better jokes. But that is not to say that my experiences are so unique that AI cannot at least some portion of it. I'm just one person among 8 billion of us. So my point is that AI can probably get 20-30% of the way today, and maybe in time it'll get even closer. But it's not there when it comes to creating good comedy. that
Yeah.
caters to me and my interests as a comedian.
Yeah. It can definitely spark. It can definitely be an inspiration. But
Right.
the real time adjustment, how do you read the room? Like, how do you gauge the audience and then improvise?
And I should tell you the story. So when my first comedy set after the poetry thing bombed, and I said, hey, let's do comedy. So I did comedy, and the first set was about Taylor Swift's armpits, and this is true story. It was literally I wrote a few jokes about Taylor Swift's armpits.
Okay,
And
I'm intrigued.
okay, I mean the actual set I have a recording on my phone. I can share with you later. But the jokes were it was terrible. As in, and I could tell that the room was like, ooh, cringing, because they were not laughing and they were looking at each other, looking at their phone. It was very obvious that the set was not going over well.
Mhm.
And my response when the audience is cold to me is to start speaking faster. And that makes it really hard because you're trying to cram more information down their throat and make sure that, the faster you speak, the more likely it is that they'll pay attention to what you're saying. So I make those rudimentary and basic mistakes as a performer because I don't um, keep my cadence. I don't keep my pace. I don't do that well when faced with an audience which is not responding to me the way I want them to respond to me. So that's a problem. How do I read the room? It's kind of self-evident when you tell a joke and then there is either dead air or there's a couple of people just smiling or laughing. And it happens every once in a while. You sort of build a thick skin to it. And if it happens during a set, you just realize that set is not going to work. Those jokes need to be reworked a lot. Some people, they call it out that the audience is either not finding it funny or they say that the audience is not ready for some jokes. For example, the set I was telling you about that of quantum mechanics and data science.
Yeah.
What was that joke? I actually had to ask them to make sure that they would be able to pick up these jokes. And
Yeah.
so I did make a couple of jokes which didn't land that well in that set. And you have to move on. You can't hold on to the fact that some jokes didn't land and try.
Yeah.
I keep going and you keep going up on stage again and again. And that A, gives you practice, B, it helps you build up a thick skin, and it exposes you to more and more people who will be your tribe, the kind of people who genuinely accept your humor and accept what you're saying and want to be attuned to you. And I think there was an article written about 10 years ago about the 10,000 people that you need or 1,000 people that you need who are your true fans. And I think stand-up comedy has that extra, it has that benefit that if you perform often enough, you'll eventually get to 1,000 people who really like your work.
Yeah.
And then you make a decent living based on just that. Have a few people who really like your work. Obviously, the goal is to be on Netflix and do, like a Netflix special is what you really want. If you can't do that, you can still make a good attempt at being a comedian by finding the audience which really likes you for what you are. And doing it again and again is the key to that. You can't get demoralized if one joke doesn't land or if one room is cold to you. You just can't do it.
Yeah. Speaking of, I'm actually going to a stand-up tonight. It's a person I have been watching on Instagram. And I think like 3 months ago, I was looking at I wonder if she's doing any tour. She lives in the UK, but she moved from somewhere. So I can see her progression. And tonight, I'll find out how she has progressed before her actual tour. Tonight is not part of her tour. She's just doing this thing at a comedy club.
So would you consider yourself a super fan of this person?
I wouldn't, not a super fan, but I do like her materials a lot. So maybe I'm not there yet because I just haven't seen enough of her.
But I think that's the key, that if you go in knowing what to expect, I think it's half the work done, because you'll know the cadence, you'll know what kind of stuff this comedian talks about and all this. I think it's that's a comedian for an audience like you who's aware of what they talk about and the kind of stuff they talk is like gold. That audience, that comedian is going to be super happy that you're there. Like, yes, Karen is my
yeah. I know she'll talk about her husband.
Right.
Yeah. So let's switch gears a little bit. I want to talk about the book you wrote. So you said a little earlier you wanted to break it down and you want to get better at it by teaching people.
Right.
So give us a summary about what the book is about.
the book is in 4 parts. The first part is just the theory of comedy. Like, what is humor? Do you have to be like a damaged soul to be funny? What do you do when the audience is cold to you? What do you do when your jokes are not landing? Examples of humor, and why is it that you need humor today more than any time else? Like, if you think about the world we're living in, it's a world which is all about artificiality. It started off with social media, and people were already frustrated by they had to present a picture of themselves that was not fully true on social media. So it's already artificial. And now we literally are living in the age of artificial intelligence, right? So humor becomes that humanness calling card. I'm a human being because I can be funny. And like you said, AI, even if it can be funny, nobody's going to type and tell me jokes into AI, into ChatGPT. Nobody's going to do that. They want that human on stage delivering the jokes and making them feel human, right? So some of that, the first part of that book covers all that and explains why humor matters way more than they think, especially in your interpersonal communication in this world of artificiality that we've created for ourselves, right? The second part of the book is the peaks of comedy. I call it the peaks of comedy because there are about 8 laughter triggers which are guaranteed to bring about like some chuckle response, at least in the audience. The laughter triggers are surprise, incongruity, embarrassment, then recognition, release, ambiguity, superiority, and configurational. So it happens to be that all these put together form sierras, and that's why they call the peaks of comedy. And that breaks down the triggers. So anybody who wants to understand how to become funnier can just skip to the second part and say, okay, how do I use incongruity, or how do I tell embarrassing stories so that the audience can empathize with me? And that's the second part. The third part is the intersection of humor and politics and humor and society, where, like the comedian I told you who got into trouble for making fun of a political guy, it's been happening every once in a while in India. There's this flare up of anger at a comedian. So I wrote a couple of articles and a couple of essays on that, on what is the audience's responsibility when it comes to comedy? Like, how much are you supposed to know? How much are you supposed to be willing to take? And just because somebody's presenting a worldview that is not in line with yours doesn't mean that you can get angry with them. So I'm trying to make a case for why comedy needs more space than what Indian laws currently give to them. We need space to be abrasive or hurtful or questioning authority or pointing out inconsistencies in people who are held up to be special. Like, we need that space, and our society is not giving us that. So the third part of that book is a few essays on that. And finally, the last part is a taxonomy of humor. Like, there's a big little doesn't make sense, but a big
See? Things like that gets you a chuckle.
So the big tree where I break down, there's humor, and the root is humor, and then from there there's wordplay, puns, irony, sarcasm, all this verbal stuff. And even within puns, there's visual puns and verbal puns, and then you go on to situational comedy and a few other things. So there's a tree structure which where you can navigate and say, I like this, I like verbal comedy, I like say dark humor or something, all those things. And finally, the one thing that I'm really proud of, which I want to put it out with the comedy world as a thing to think about, just like you have TV shows and movies which have ratings, I think comedians also need to come up with a rating system. If you go to watch and it says TV MA, you know that you don't want to take your kids for that. If it says TVG or PG-13, you know your kids are okay watching that. We need a similar classification system for comedy as well. Because not every comedian is going to start off having millions of followers and know exactly what kind of comedy he's going to bring to the table, he or she's going to bring to the table, and know whether to take their kids or their parents, or they want to take their co-workers to it. So we need a classification system. As a community of comedians, we need that. Otherwise, we're always going to be hoping that, and the reason for this is because earlier this year, I was supposed to perform at a corporate event, and fortunately, right around the time I was supposed to perform, a different comedian had got into trouble with I guess the online community, which was upset about something he said. He made a joke about sex, and it pissed off the people who didn't like this topic being discussed. And he was sort of shut down, and the Supreme Court of India got involved, and they made sure that he was not able to perform for some time. And because of that, I was not able to perform because the company calling me for that event. They're like, oh, you know what? What if this guy? They know me through my contact at that company. They don't know me personally, and what if this guy comes and says something ridiculous and our employees get upset and they raise a fuss about it on social media? Then we will get blacklisted and we'll have egg on our face because of this guy. So I couldn't perform. And in fact, this is also the true story. Because that cancellation happened, because I couldn't perform at that corporate event because of some other comedian, I decided to do two things. I decided, one, to write this book so that if you have a book out, people take you a little more seriously. They're like, okay, this guy is not just some random comedian who doesn't know how to write a book, who doesn't know how to write sentences together. That book came as an outcome of that. I had already had much of it done, but that actual conversion from, say, handwritten essays into something which can be published in a book form came after that event, that incident that I could perform. And then the other thing that you haven't talked about, and I haven't mentioned this to you, but I also did a TEDx talk where I talked about the engineering aspects of comedy. How do you engineer your way to being funny? Because that's what I did. Looked at comedy, broke it down, and figured out how to be funny. And then I'm trying to be funny based on that. So my TEDx talk is also on that. So these are two things I'm like, listen, if I'm going to get rejected, I should be rejected on my terms, not because some third comedian is having everybody's getting yelled at.
Yes.
I want to get rejected on my terms. So that is why I did the book and I did the TEDx talk. So that's the long and short of it.
All right. So for this last part, let's play something.
Sure.
Adding in a little bit of element of surprise here. We'll do a lightning round, like quick questions, quick answers. Don't need to think too much. Just gut reaction.
That's one thing I'm not good at quick answers, but I'm going to try it.
So just be honest. That's how you do it.
All right.
Who's your all-time favorite comedian?
I'm going to go with Nimesh Patel. I really like him. And I like Kunal.
Yep. Yeah. He's one of my top two. Okay. What's the worst advice someone has given you about comedy?
The worst advice is be yourself on stage. No, comedy is a performance just like anything else. It's literally a show that you're putting on for people. Being yourself they're not paying you to be yourself on stage. They're paying you to be entertaining on stage. So that advice, if people give you that advice that comedy is just being yourself on stage, that's nonsense. You are a persona just like anything else. Like Jeff Foxworthy, he's not. I'm sure he doesn't sit around saying making redneck jokes all the time. He's a sensible guy, but on stage he's a person who makes redneck jokes. The Larry the Cable Guy, he's obviously not going to sit around doing goofy comedy about being a redneck. He's a businessman. So personas are reality on stage, and when people say be yourself on stage or comedy is easy because all you have to do is just show up and tell jokes, that's not true. It's work. It's a lot of work.
All right. A joke you thought you would bomb, but it actually crushed it.
I was really, and this is one of those culture shock things that traveling to the US from India happened. When I went to the States, I expected to be, super impressed, and the culture shock I expected to be the big buildings and the fancy roads and fancy cars and all that. But my big culture shock was realizing that the toilet culture in the US is very, very different from the toilet culture. Yeah. And I realized that maybe it's just the people I hung out with, I don't know. But the people in American toilets, they're very casual about it. They're very chatty about it. It's not like a place where you go, shut up, do your business and leave. So that was a big thing. I made a joke about that one time. And it was a joke. I mean, the audience was, it was not just young people, it's the older people in the audience as well. And that joke landed really well because they found the entire scene that I was painting for them, that I was using the bathroom and my boss came in and started talking to me across the street, the door, and how embarrassed I was because I'd been taught not to open my mouth in the bathroom. So those things went over really well with this audience, which I didn't expect. My mother was in the audience and she's in her 70s. Then I had a few other people I know who were in their 60s and 70s. And even they liked it. So when I sort of was telling the story as a lighthearted observation, but it turned into something that the audience, the initial audience liked a lot. They loved the fact that there was an insight into American culture that they were getting from this joke of mine. And now this is actually part of a set that I'm working on that I'm probably going to debut very soon. But that is one thing I'm like, oh yeah, even toilet jokes, which don't have to be literally toilet jokes, can work. That is my real.
But that's good. That's a pleasant surprise.
Yes.
Hey. So the next one, I don't know if it's something you can answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Sure. If your humor style were a programming language, what would it be and why?
Wow. If my humor style were a programming language, what would it be and why? So I don't know if HTML is considered a language or not, but it's what you use to beautify your
Mhm.
website.
Yeah.
As in
For this
sure.
purpose, let's include HTML as a language.
Right. So it's used to create a visual effect on screen. So I think my comedy is also like that, that I'm painting a picture, I'm creating a scene for people to be part of from their seats. So in a way, I'm creating a visual interface to a world that they don't live in. I'm telling them through my words and my delivery, I'm creating that. So I guess the closest analogy I can think of would be that my comedy is like HTML, CSS, so those things which you use to make UIs.
Great styles.
I'm creating a visual representation of the world for people.
All right. Great answer. One thing Americans never understand about Indian humor. So something that Indian audience would find funny, Americans won't.
So I've noticed this about American speakers who come to India and perform and they deliver speeches and all that. They don't realize that cultures are different. And let me give you an example. In February this year, I was part of a conference, and this woman came. She's the global head of that whatever company was organizing that conference. She came to India and she delivered a keynote speech, and there were a few things which didn't work. The Indian audience was not responding to her because dry humor doesn't work in India. Really deadpan, dry humor doesn't land in India at all. And she was making jokes about the fact that she was a divorcee who was single. She was making jokes about her weight. She was making jokes about her appearance. And I could see that if this joke had been said in, say, Vegas or somewhere which is like New York's comedy scene or San Francisco's comedy scene, they would have gotten over really well because she's a sweet lady who's delivering jokes about the way she looks she's in the mid 60s. It is funny because, she was talking about the fact that no guy ever looks at her and all those things. But it was extremely deadpan, extremely dry, and it didn't work. Indian audiences need that cue that, okay, I'm being funny now. I'm being funny now. I'm being funny now. They need that guidance, those jokes. The other thing is, so that doesn't carry over well. So American audiences who are not professional comedians, who are not aware of this, if they're just speakers or they're, say, actors or something, and they have an interview in a newspaper article which covers, say, a movie that they're releasing or something to an Indian audience, they will tend to be deadpan, they'll tend to be dry. And if they're that, it's not going to, the Indian audiences it'll just go over their heads. They'll not even realize that this person is being funny. So I would advise any American person, media person, who's targeting an Indian audience to not be so dry. Just be as obvious as possible when it comes to humor. The other thing is, and this is another thing that happened at that same conference, the people's relationship with objects between the US and India, and obviously it's true everywhere, is different. So this woman, she was making a point that opportunities, and she had a bunch of Indian currency in her hand, and her point was opportunities like money fall on you can pick up opportunities from money fall on the ground, and she dropped money on the stage. And and as she walked back, she picked up those currency notes and said, here's opportunity number 1, here's opportunity number 2. As a visual, it is really arresting. Even now, after months, I still remember exactly what she did. But Indians have a relationship with money which is different from the way Americans treat money. Okay, we don't want money to touch the floor ever. Another thing, this is another thing that was a culture shock moment for me, when I had a boss and he used to sit with his feet up on the table every once in a while. Well, not during important, like during work, but if you're having a conversation, having a one-on-one meeting, he used to sit with his feet up on the table. And I used to notice that if his feet were pointing at me, I'd start feeling really uncomfortable. Like, why is this looking?
Was this in the States?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
So that's another cultural thing, that Americans are so accustomed to their culture being familiar and available to everyone through their soft power. Things they take for granted, like their relationship with currency notes, or their relationship with putting up their feet on the table, or their relationship being chatty in bathrooms, is not the norm everywhere else. So 2 pieces of advice to any media person in the US, if they're coming to India or going out of America, is A, realize that dry humor doesn't work outside, say, very specific audiences, and B, know the culture you're talking to and make that you have at least someone to give you some feedback before you go out and do your set, that this might work well for that audience.
Yeah, like talking to you before they do it. Don't you wish Russell Peters talked to you before?
I would have told him that your doctor jokes are not going to work. Don't waste your time with that set. That's a large part of his set.
Okay. Final one. One word your friends would never use to describe you, but your audience might.
You'll have to give me a couple of choices of this one. I have no idea what my friends would use to.
Do your friends think you're funny?
I mean, they don't think I'm not funny, because even in school, we used to have, my high school friends, we're still part of the same WhatsApp group and stuff. I know that we used to have a couple of us, we used to have a lot of fun with our teachers and stuff, as in pleasant fun, not I'm having fun at their expense, but with bantering with them and joking with them. So I know that from the time I was in school, I was at least maybe not the class clown, but close enough. Like, this guy he's not unfunny. So I know funny is not going to be the word that they're looking for. Maybe I think my friends would probably call me intense, but I don't think they realize that there's an intense and maybe they pick up a little bit, but they don't probably associate the word intense with me. Maybe not. I think that's the closest I can think of.
So you said something about persona. On stage, you're a completely different person. You're just acting. You're not being yourself. Like, how different are the two for you?
How different am I? That's a fantastic question. Now you make me think.
Maybe that can go into your next set.
Wait, what is it? So maybe maybe the physical aspects of delivery are not very different between the way I'm talking to you now and the way I'm on stage. Might not be that different, but the reality of the story I'm telling them might need to be a little bit tweaked. For example, that if I was making a joke about cybercrime, okay, and so it really did happen in my family that we lost a bunch of money to cyber criminals. So I might not tell the story the way it happened. I might amp it up a little. I might amp up the stress we felt or the outcomes that happened. I might do those things. That's one thing that I'm sure I do in terms of delivery, in terms of story creation, not delivery, story creation. In terms of delivery, I think when I'm talking to you and I'm talking to friends, I speak fast. I speak quick. I speak. I'm trying to get as much stuff into my answers as possible.
Yeah, but a little bit. I noticed.
So on stage, it's a lot more mindful that I cannot afford to go and start second guessing myself or, offering more context to a joke. You have to let the audience work it out for themselves, or take it at face value that you've said something and this is what happened, or this is what they should be interpreting from it. So those are things that are different between how I'm on stage. I'm more measured. Maybe that's the answer. That's the key. On stage, I'm more measured simply because I can't afford to keep explaining and giving more and more context and color and explanations to everything I say. It's going to take forever to finish a set. So in fact, even now, you might be noticing that I do a lot of that. I go here, I work, I think of something to say, then I come back and say something else. That is more conversational, and I think that's how people are. But on stage, that goes away, that I'm far more measured on stage.
Thank you very much for talking to me today. I have been wanting to talk to someone who is in the comedy scene since the beginning of this podcast. So I'm really, really glad I found you. And thank you for sharing your journey, your tips and tricks, and how to be funny and how to add funny content, how to add humor into people's content.
I'm glad to have this opportunity to talk to you. And your questions were really thought-provoking. And I'm like, I don't know if I will have an answer for many of the questions you asked, but I'm hoping that some of them made sense. And I'm just happy to have given whatever I could to this interview.
Thank you so much. Thanks for listening to this episode of Mind Blend. If you enjoyed the conversation, don't forget to follow and share it with anyone who needs to hear it. And let's keep the conversation going. Connect with me on LinkedIn or leave me a comment. Until next time, stay curious, keep exploring, and let's continue to blend our minds and discover what's possible.